So this is the last video on the 5 types of reactions and how to predict the products. For combustion, this is actually the simplest of the 5 types. A combustion reaction, remember, is going to be one in which you always have a carbon-hydrogen thing, also called a hydrocarbon, reacting with O2. And it's always going to form the same exact 2 products. So actually 3 of the pieces will always be the same thing. So we will always have a fuel plus O2 forming CO2 and water every single time. Okay. So if a combustion reaction is complete, you always form CO2 and water. I will tell you there are incomplete reactions where we form carbon monoxide and water, but that's not covered at this level of chemistry. Combustion reactions are always considered exothermic. Think back to the demonstration I did in class. This was obviously a very exothermic reaction. Okay, so anything that kind of goes boom is a combustion reaction, and these are exothermic, meaning they give off lots of heat. Okay. The typical format or recipe for a combustion reaction is a hydrocarbon, a hydrogen carbon thing, plus O2, forming carbon dioxide and water, H2O. Remember, I poured out of the demonstration, that big, huge jug, I poured water out of it to show you water formed, okay? So a hydrocarbon, by the way, again, let me reiterate, is a compound that contains both hydrogen and carbon. Occasionally, it'll also include oxygen or sulfur, but that's a little bit more rare, especially at this level. So here's an example. We have C4H10 plus O2. We immediately look at this and see, ooh, there's an O2, and we see we have a hydrocarbon. So now we know that this is a combustion reaction. So immediately, without even thinking, we can write our products as CO2 and water. We don't even have to think about these. It is always CO2 and water for combustion reactions. Now, the hard part would be balancing it. So if we balance this one, we'll notice that we need to have a 2, 13, 8, and 10. This is one that's a little more challenging to balance. I encourage you to start with a 2 in front of your fuel. Remember, that was one of my tricks when I started teaching you how to balance, is to put a 2 in front of the fuel, which is the hydrocarbon, at the beginning of a combustion reaction. That will make that 13 a lot easier to see. Okay, here's another combustion reaction. We have C6H12O6. This one should be familiar from biology class. So we've got glucose plus O2, and we are combusting it. So we will again form CO2 and water every single time. Notice that if you go through, you can balance it, and you'll end up with 3 6s, one in front of the O2, one in front of the CO2, and one in front of the water. You do end up with a 1 in front of the C6H12O6. Okay, so for combustion reactions, remember, no matter what, if it's combustion, it's a carbon-hydrogen hydrocarbon thing reacting with O2, and it must be O2, then it will form CO2 and water. That's it for combustion. Fairly straightforward and simple.